Hello and welcome to today's webinar titled Off the Cliff, Minnesota's Legislative Nosedive and the Climb Back to Sanity. This is a presentation that we did from Center of the American Experiment. By the way, I'm Bill Walsh. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for Center of the American Experiment. We did this presentation about 25 times over the course of the summer of 2023 here. And we promised everybody as we went that we would eventually put one online so people could review it, see the slides, and have it all in one place. So that's what you're seeing today. I'm going to run the presentation in my office with no live audience. So hopefully you're watching at home. You'll be the live audience. And we'll go through the entire presentation. It's broken down into the tax and spending side, and then the policy side, and then a little bit on the climb back to sanity. It is an overwhelming presentation. It is a sobering presentation. What they did in the 2023 legislative session was off the cliff, is what we called it. But we think it's important to know what they did, and then some steps forward and some hope at the end. So let me share my screen and we'll jump right in to the presentation. Okay, if I can do this right, share. I'm going to make it nice and big so I can see it. And off we go. So a little bit about us. You're here, so it means you somewhat know about AmericanExperiment.org. You're probably seeing this presentation from our website, but if you don't know, our website is a great resource for all kinds of content. We have writers, policy fellows that write and research and publish every day in education, the economy. We have two economists. We have energy, public safety, healthcare. So there's new content on our website daily. Check it out if you haven't already. All right, let's get right into the presentation then. Starting with the political environment. You've heard the phrase, the trifecta, many times. All that means is that all of government in Minnesota is run by one party. Obviously, Governor Walz is the governor, a Democrat. The House is controlled by Democrats, 70-64, and the Senate controlled by a one-vote margin by Democrats, 34-33. We're going to refer to that a lot today because everything will give for two reasons, really. One, there's some hope that the whole state has not gone off the cliff. The state is barely Democrat. The legislature is barely controlled by Democrats with this one vote majority that really came down to one Senate seat in Hastings and Cottage Grove, where the margin was just a few hundred votes, and this whole agenda is much harder to pass. The second reason it's important is because everything I'm about to talk to you about, all of the votes, all of the spending and taxing, was passed by the Senate on 34-33 vote. 34 Democrats voted for it, 33 Republicans voted against it. So really a razor-thin margin. Now, as we go, we're going to show a lot of polling from our legislative polling, or our polling we do from Thinking Minnesota. Thinking Minnesota poll comes from our magazine, our free quarterly magazine called Thinking Minnesota. If you don't already subscribe to that, click on our website and sign up. It's a free quarterly magazine. And we do a poll every magazine to go along with it. So I'm going to show you a lot of polling today. We're just going to start with the lay of the land. So as the legislature was finishing their agenda in May, the last few days of the legislative session, when I would argue it was at the height of its popularity, we called it the selfie session. The governor was taking selfies, the legislature was taking selfies. They're very proud of what they were doing. They got great coverage in the media, very favorable coverage by the Star Tribune, the TV stations. And we were in the field polling during that time, during those last 3 days, at the height of the popularity of this agenda. And fully 59% of Minnesotans rated the work only fair or poor. So when we say off the cliff, there's some hope here that, yes, they took the legislation off the cliff, but the state is really not with them. Another polling thing we track a lot is right track or wrong track. Is the state generally on the right track or the wrong track? We've been asking it forever. It's a kind of a common polling thing to ask. You can see in March 2019, 57% of Minnesotans believe we're on the right track. But now, May 2023, as this agenda was passing, 51% say wrong track. First time a majority of Minnesotans have said wrong track. So keep that in mind as we go through all of this stuff. The public is really not with them. All right, let's get right into it. Taxes and spending was the first half of this presentation. You've heard a lot about a $17.6 billion budget surplus, largest surplus, in the history of the state for sure. I'm here to tell you, sadly, it's gone. It's all been accounted for. It's spent. They accounted for every last dime. It is gone. And a lot of it is going to go into the annual growth in the state budget, in the base of the state budget. So the budget's going to grow. Here's one stat, $24.7 billion to $32.8 billion a year annually. That's a 32% increase in the state budget. Here's another slide that kind of shows that the 2022-23 budget that we just finished, $52 billion over the biennium. It balloons up to $69.5 billion. You can see in the next biennium. That's because a lot of that surplus is one-time money. It's sort of accumulated in the bank. It's here, but it needs to be spent. It can be spent. Could have been returned, but wasn't. So that's a lot of it was spent in this next biennium. And then in the following biennium, 26-27, we're at $64.4 billion for the biennial spending. So just massive new government spending. And here's a slide, again, back to polling. We've asked this for a long time. We've asked Minnesotans, how much of the state budget do you think is wasted? And we've had this answer over the years. It's been 27, 28%. We just asked it again, and it went up to 34%. Minnesotans believe 34% of the state government budget is wasted. That's a lot as we start to go through spending. Just keep that in mind. And look at that jump, 6% jump from September 2019 to February 2023. We like to call that the Feeding Our Future jump. You're very familiar, I'm sure, with the Feeding Our Future food fraud scandal. Our Bill Glahn at the American Experiment kind of exposed that in a lot of his writing. That, I think, made Minnesotans even more skeptical of state government spending, and that number jumped. So what does state government spend money on? It's people. It's government employees and their union employees. Just be clear on that. And we've added hundreds, thousands of new employees with this new state budget. That's how government grows. Just a few examples. A new paid family leave program that we're going to talk about in a bit is slated to have a new agency with 400 employees in it. The new Office of Cannabis Management that you're going to hear a lot about over the next few years to manage the new cannabis legalization is going to have 200 employees. The governor created a new Children, Youth, and Families division or agency. That's going to have 100 new employees. New employees in every state agency. The governor's office gets new employees. The legislature is growing. Every state agency has new employees. That's how you spend a $17.6 billion budget surplus. A couple other big things to point out on the spending side. Human services and education are the two largest areas of spending in the state. And human services spending went up a lot. You can see in this graph, in 2022-23, it's about $15.1 billion. It goes up to $20.2 billion in 24-25, and then up to $22.2 billion in 26-27. This is all of the healthcare that the government pays for. This is welfare programs. It is unsustainable growth. It was unsustainable before this last budget, and they did nothing to slow it down. And it's on steroids now. Education, same thing. The legislature always adds money to K-12 schools. It's very politically popular. Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. Put more money on the education formula, which is how we fund education, how much per kid. The Democrats, though, this year did something a little extra. They tied the formula to inflation. So now the formula is going to go up per kid. Formula for education is going to go up on inflation, on autopilot, without the legislature even have to vote on it. That is just going to be unsustainable as well. Another thing that we did in education is we are now going to have local school districts are going to have to pay seasonal employees like bus drivers, cooks, folks that work 9 months a year and then go off for the summer, then come back. They've been petitioning to get unemployment insurance, and so now they're going to be in the unemployment system just like their other employees, which is going to cost your local school district even more money. Somehow we've managed to make it all this time without that happening, but this year they're going to be on unemployment. So again, huge budget trouble ahead with these two big parts of the government or the budget, human services and K-12 education. They make up 70% of the state budget, and I would argue they're on autopilot in many ways. It's going to be very difficult to slow down the spending as we go forward. So that's spending. Let's talk about tax increases. The legislature in 2023 added over the next 4 years, our taxes are going to go up $9 billion. Now, that number keeps growing, by the way. When session ended, we thought it was like $7 billion. More research comes out, $8 billion. The legislative caucus staff does another analysis. Looks like $9 billion in new tax increases and fee increases over the next 4 years. Of course, the surplus wasn't enough. They had to actually add increases in taxes as well. And they're not done yet. They gave permission for 37 cities and counties to go out for referendum to raise local sales taxes as well. So you may live in one of those cities or counties where your local sales taxes are going to go up in addition to your income taxes and the fees that went up. So again, checking in with the polling, we've asked this for a long time, do you think taxes are too high? Do you think taxes are too low or about right? 60% of Minnesotans in May 2023 think taxes are too high. 3% think they're too low. And they listen to the 3% and they raise taxes even more. So this is what we got. So what they raise taxes on specifically, a lot of things. We're going to go a few. They raise the sales tax, especially in the metro area, to pay for transit, to pay for housing, your restaurant bill, your bar tab, all of that's going up in the metro area in the sales tax. They raised the gas tax and they indexed it to inflation, so it's going to go up automatically in the next few years. They raised your car tab fees a lot. They changed the way they figure out what the value of your car is, and they're going to tax the heck out of it. You're going to see that soon. If you have a boat in Minnesota, which a lot of us do, the boat fees are up. They raise taxes on employees and employers, specifically the paid family leave I'm going to talk about in a minute, but there are other taxes on employers that they raised. They added a new delivery fee for all orders over $100. There's a new delivery fee that the state of Minnesota is going to put on. And of course, they tax their favorite industry, the new industry, marijuana. Marijuana will be taxed at a very high rate in Minnesota. Of course, new industry, new tax. And again, these tax increases are not popular. They went over the cliff. They did not bring Minnesotans with them along for the ride. 50% oppose the new payroll tax for the family leave program. 57% are against the sales taxes in the metro area. 72% are against that delivery fee. And fully 81% of Minnesotans oppose raising car tab fees. Of course they do. That's never been popular. They did it anyway. So that is tax increases. You're going to hear, you heard, I think, during the session, a lot about, the governor talked about this, the largest tax cut in Minnesota history. How could that be when we just showed you they raised taxes $9 billion? Well, they didn't cut any taxes. The no tax rates were cut in this plan. So the idea that there was a largest tax cut in Minnesota history is a complete lie. The bill they passed was a large dollar amount. The tax bill had a very large dollar amount attached to it. They call that the largest tax cut in Minnesota history. It's the largest tax bill, but it's a massive redistribution of wealth from people who pay taxes to people who don't pay taxes. A good example here is on the slide is the child tax credits. Again, that's just transferring wealth to people who don't pay taxes, and they phase out after $35,000 of income for a family of four. So there's very few people are going to be eligible for that. You've heard about the Walls checks. They've all been sent out now as we stand here in September. They started at $1,000. It shrunk down to $260 per person in this tax bill. Again, a redistribution of wealth, not a rate cut. And if you made over $80,000 a year, you got no Walls check or surplus check. So that's all been a lie. $17 billion surplus, not enough. They still had to borrow money. We went out and borrowed $1.5 billion to be paid off by taxpayers over the next 20 years. You couldn't pay cash for these projects. These are the state capital projects around the state, but really it's pork. There's a lot of pork in this. There was no limit. There was nobody saying, let's not spend money. So you get the real big pork. We paid for ice rinks. We paid for swimming pools. We paid for zoos. We paid for curling clubs. We paid for ski chalets. And this is the Spirit Mountain Chalet in Duluth, a boondoggle of a project that we keep spending money on. Our favorite is the Minnesota Loon Center up near Bemidji or Brainerd, I'm sorry. So we're going to have a Minnesota Loon Center, millions of dollars that you paid for, you're going to pay for over time in the bonding bill, just full of pork. They did something different in addition to the pork spending in the bonding bill. This year, we're going to have money going directly to nonprofits. This is kind of the new trend in the legislature from the Democrats, funding their friends who run nonprofits to do good things in the community. Feeding Our Future, great example of this. So $225 million additionally will go directly to nonprofits from the bonding bill. And this is everything from, I say this, from the Norway House all the way to the Somali Museum and everything in between. You can see on the slide, St. Paul Urban Tennis, all these nonprofits are getting money directly from the state now. What could go wrong? I'm sure we'll be writing about these things very soon on our website. Free stuff, the last thing to talk about on the budget side. We gave away a lot of free stuff in the legislature in 2023. Of course, none of it is free. It is There is no free stuff. This is taxpayer dollars going to people, and for all kinds of different things. Free lunch and breakfast for all students, no matter what your income. Everyone's getting a free lunch at school today. Completely unnecessary and overkill, but that's coming to schools right now. Free college tuition for illegal immigrants, free college tuition for kids whose parents make less than $80,000 a year. Again, not free. Someone else is going to be paying for that tuition. Free healthcare for illegal immigrants. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Free housing, free childcare. Housing and childcare are two industries in Minnesota that are really expensive compared to other states. And saying that we're going to give money to people for housing and give money to people for childcare actually makes the problem worse. We've written a lot about this on our website. Martha Jolamoli has written a ton about this, especially in the childcare area. The government coming in and paying for things actually grows the cost of it for everybody else. But we did $1 billion in free housing in this bill this year, and money for free childcare. And a new one this year, free diapers. If you can find out access to this program, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars here for people in Minnesota to get free diapers, kids, grandkids. I say find it and take advantage of it. And last but not least, on the free side, free menstrual products for all students, girls and boys, all the way down to the 5th grade. What could go wrong here, right? I mean, I'm thinking of 5th grade boys. The menstrual products in the bathrooms for boys and girls is absolutely insane and absurd. But this is what we're doing in the 2023 session. That's why we called it Off the Cliff. So that's the spending side. Let's talk policy now. If you're not depressed enough with all the money that's gone and the taxes and the spending, let's talk about some policy. First one up, paid family leave. This is kind of also a tax issue, like we talked about. This is going to be a new program. We call it paid family leave, paid for by you, because you're going to be paying for it. We start with seeding the fund. This is essentially going to be an insurance fund, like unemployment insurance. So that has to start with some money in it. So we put $650 million of the surplus into this account to begin this fund. The rest of it's going to be paid for by all of us as employees and employers with a new payroll tax, 0.7%. Everybody's going to pay it, no matter where you work, no matter what size business you're in. Half by the employee, half by the employer. So it'll be 0.035 for me, 0.035 for the company, paid for by everybody to build this fund to cover paid time off for when you have a spouse that's sick or a pregnancy, things like this. It creates a new bureaucracy, like we talked about, 400 new employees to manage this massive new insurance program. No exemptions, like we said, for small businesses. Everyone's going to be in this. The hard part's going to be when someone in a very small business comes and says, I'm going to take advantage of the state's paid family leave program. I'm going to leave for 6 or 8 or 12 weeks. How is that small business going to take over the work that person was doing? It's great that the state's going to cover some of their salary when they're gone. But who's going to do the work? This is going to be a very, very tough strain on small businesses. And one last thing on paid family leave, their own financial assumptions never added up on this bill. This bill went through many committees during session and never had what's called a fiscal note, the documentation that says how much it's going to cost. And Republicans kept asking, where's the fiscal note? Where's the fiscal note? Halfway through, they produced a fiscal note for the bill at the time. Then the bill went through another half of their committee journey and changed quite a bit. And on the floor, when it passed and was signed by the governor, the fiscal note no longer fit what the bill was. So they have no idea what this is really going to cost. It's going to be a massive new computer system. Think MinLars, think MinSure. This is a disaster waiting to happen down the road. But again, here's another theme in the polling we're going to talk about. A lot of the things that they passed sound popular. They sound good. Paid family leave, incredibly popular with Minnesotans. If you just ask them, like we did here in our poll, 74% support of paid family leave that covers partial wages when you have to take time off to have a baby or care for a loved one. Of course they do. But when you dig deeper, when you ask the next question, well, what if you knew that it creates a new bureaucracy of state government employees of 400 people? Well, 56% of the people we polled were much less likely to support this, knowing more about the program. So that's going to be a theme we go to a lot. Sounds good on its face, but when in the details, not so popular. All right, leaving paid family leave, go to energy. So the main thing they did in the session in the energy was they passed a blackout bill. This is Governor Walz's proposal to have all of our electricity come from renewable sources, wind and solar, by the year 2040. We are now on that path. We called it the blackout bill because we believe two things. It's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to cause intermittent blackouts or brownouts when we get at the height of this, relying all of our energy on wind and solar. We actually did a report, the high cost of 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. We costed out Governor Walz's proposal, $313 billion over the course of the program, which is going to be $3,800 per electricity customer per year. So this is your electricity bill is coming soon. It's going to go up because of this legislation. We could have added that to the tax slide because that's a de facto tax increase for all families. In addition to the blackout bill, they also love to hand out subsidies to subsidize things that the market won't support, like electric vehicles. So we put $15.6 million into electric vehicle subsidies. We have new $1,500 rebates for electric bikes. There are subsidies for electric school buses and all kinds of other things. And again, looking at the polling, if you ask about the governor's energy plan, we should have more renewables. People say, oh, that sounds great. So, but even that has been going down. September 2021, you can see 58%. November 2022, a few months later, a year later, 51% support that. But then when you dig deeper, when you say it's going to cause you to pay $3,800 more on your energy bill a year, the support just disappears. So once again, sounds popular, but once the details are out there, what the cost is, what the bureaucracy is going to look like, the support goes away. That is energy. Education. They did a lot of things in education. We don't have time to go through all of it. So we're going to focus on kind of what we think are some of the most important or damaging things that the legislature did. And the top of that list is the Radical Ethnic Studies program that's been put in place. This is CRT on steroids, critical race theory on steroids. This is the embodiment of critical race theory. They say there's no critical race theory in schools, that just point to ethnic studies. High schools now will have to offer an ethnic studies course by the year 26-27. This is a bit of a win because when it started the session, it was going to be a requirement that all kids take an ethnic studies course. It got watered down a bit because the school boards actually fought back to just the course has to be offered. But the worst part of it is ethnic studies will be embedded into all academic standards through all grades in the next few years. This is a massive change in our academic standards. And this is not the civic standards, the social studies standards. We're talking math standards. We're talking reading, language arts, gym, art. All of the academic standards are going to be through this lens of ethnic studies. And it's going to be very damaging. And what do they mean by ethnic studies? It's not, learning more about other cultures. They're very specific in the definition in the statute. I'm just going to read it because you really need to do it. Ethnic studies analyzes the ways in which race and racism have been and continue to be social, cultural, and political forces. So they're saying it right in the statute. Political forces. This is a political agenda. This is divisive. It's dividing kids, and it's an activist agenda. This is coming to your math standards, your social studies standards, your English language arts standards. We call it the bait and switch because they sell it as, oh, it's learn about other cultures. We're going to learn about, I'm Irish, so we're going to learn about Irish music and Irish foods, and we want to learn about cultures and a greater understanding. We'll all get along better. No one's against that. No one's against that. No one's against teaching the real history of America, by the way, warts and all. But this is a very, very divisive, separate kids by race, activist political agenda. And just look to their language. Look to the language I just showed you. Don't believe me. So again, if you ask Minnesotans, do you support ethnic studies? 51% support, because it sounds like, cultures, studying about other cultures. I support that. But if you explain it's not about cultures, it's about a divisive agenda to dismantle America's fundamental institutions, that support flips again. Other changes in the K-12 education area, a very popular program, PSEO, post-secondary enrollment options, that allows high school kids to take classes on a college campus and get credit both for the high school course and the college course, get them a little head start in college. Again, a popular program that's been used decades in Minnesota. The legislature, the Democrats woke up one day and said that private colleges, religious colleges that have a faith statement of faith really shouldn't be participating in this program. So the de facto result of this is that they're not going to allow these universities that have a faith statement to participate in PSEO, which is going to deny kids that want to do that opportunity. The good news here is there's a lawsuit already in place to slow that down. That might be unconstitutional. Another change in education that's going to cost people money, a little taxation without representation. School boards can now renew an existing operating referendum without going to the voters. So you pass a referendum and it lasts 10 years. When that expires, typically a school district has to go back out to the voters and say, do you want to continue this tax to pay for operating our school district? They're going to be able to do that one time without going to the voters, just renew it themselves. So there's a little more taxation in your future in your school district. Okay, the area of healthcare. Really, to sum up healthcare in the 2023 session, building a bigger healthcare bureaucracy and taking us on a path to single payer or government payer of healthcare. No surprise that they would do that, but this is where we're headed. They created some different bureaucracies. The Prescription Drug Affordability Board was created, unelected, appointed by the governor, a new bureaucracy. They're going to have the power to set payments on limit drug prices. And the result's going to be a disaster. Of course, they're going to have less drugs available for people, and they're going to cost more, of course. They created a Center for Healthcare Affordability. This organization is going to report to the governor, and they're going to micromanage how Mayo Clinic and Health Partners and other big health systems run their business. Again, it's not going to be good for consumers at the end of the day. And they're just on this march to socialized medicine. I mentioned earlier, free healthcare for illegal immigrants. They'll be able to be in the Minnesota Care program. We're adding a public option to Minnesota Care. Minnesota Care is a unique Minnesota program that allows the working poor to get healthcare at very, very subsidized, cheap rates. But we're going to now allow other people that normally wouldn't qualify to be in that program to buy into it. The effect of this is going to ruin the private healthcare industry in Minnesota, which more people on government plan is the goal, and they're headed right towards it. So that's healthcare. Public safety. We would argue after the session, Minnesota is less safe, not more safe. They passed a 529-page public safety bill that really doesn't address the root problem in Minnesota. If you asked anybody, it would be the sense of lawlessness, the crime stats that are up across the state, not just in the Twin Cities. But their bill, just every new initiative did not deal with criminals. It dealt with the impact on the offender. So they have the philosophy just mixed up. There's all about the offender, about rehabilitation, incarceration, things like that. So here's a bunch of things they passed. We just kind of have a list. Just think about how they sound, all focused on the offender. Earned incentive release, prosecutor-initiated sentence reductions, clemency review, automatic expungements, supervision abatement for probation, and then, of course, felon voting, which we'll talk about in a minute. All focused on offenders, not focused on reducing crime, victims, things like that. And then the two big things they did in this area, we would argue, make the safe less safe, not more safe. The gun control that they put in place is going to effectively make Minnesota a less safe place. And legalization of recreational marijuana, that's going to, down the road, is going to cause more public safety problems for sure. And then just nothing. They did nothing to fix the revolving door of justice at all. And then one last thing in this area, they created a new bias registry for reporting and collecting, I'll just say it, incidents that members of the community believe are motivated by bias. So we have bias crimes in Minnesota. If you can prove that a crime was committed with an intent with a bias, you can have an enhanced penalty. This is a new registry, so you're going to be able to call it. It's open right now. You can call into the State Department of Human Rights and report your neighbor, somebody, for an incident that you believe are motivated by bias. So again, what could go wrong here when we get this database collected? What are they going to do with it? We're concerned about that. Speaking of concern, Minnesotans remain really concerned about the level of crime in Minnesota. We've been polling this ever since the riots in 2020, and you can see just 80%, 86%, now 77%. Our pollster tells us that it's just baked in, that Minnesotans just have this level of concern about crime that's just not going away. That's a sad statement on our state. That's just where we're at on crime. Okay, moving to elections. Stacking the deck in elections. Again, they did a lot of things in the area of elections. We're going to just highlight a few of the big ones. talked about allowing convicted felons the right to vote. And this just flips it on its head. The Constitution, it's in the Constitution, the Minnesota Constitution, that your civil rights are taken away if you commit a felony. Normally in Minnesota forever, that has been, the entire sentence. And our sentences are part in prison and part on probation. And the Democrats just changed that to once you're out of prison, once you're no longer incarcerated, you can start to vote. You restore your civil rights to vote, even though your sentence is not complete. And so one of the real problems to this is that some felons, many felons in Minnesota, never lose their civil rights. They never go to prison. So they're never going to lose their right to vote, even though they've committed a felony. This is, misplaced. Another big thing they've changed is this lifetime absentee voter list that we call it. If you vote absentee in a general election, the Secretary of State, the counties are just going to assume that that's how you want to vote in the future. They're just going to mail you that ballot every year. You're going to be an automatic list. So there's many, many, many more ballots floating around in the mail without the proper paperwork, without that prior application process in place. That's just going to lead to opportunities for fraud for sure. And then similar to the bias registry, we have another chilling speech of thing. It's now going to be a gross misdemeanor to transmit false information about an election within 60 days of voting. Now they say the only example they used in this was, well, there's the old joke that, Democrats vote on Wednesday, Republicans vote on Tuesday, which is an absurd, it's a joke. That is now speech that can be a gross misdemeanor because you've transmitted false information on when the election is. This is just a foot in the door for getting at misinformation that Steve Simon, the Secretary of State, is concerned about, which is in fact not misinformation. It's just speech. It's speech on one side or the other of the election, but they're going to try to limit it with this new rule. A couple of polling looks now. 60% of Minnesotans are opposed to preemptively restoring voting rights for felons. This has no support with the public. Again, they went off the cliff. Public is not with them on felon voting at all. Okay, last policy issue, the social agenda. And I can say at Center of the American Experiment, historically for 30 years, we have not really been in the social issue part of the agenda. We're more about economics, about markets, about energy, education, school choice. But it was hard to watch the session in 2023 and not comment on the social agenda because the Democrats really pushed the envelope on many things. We'll just talk about a few. Obviously, abortion, top of that list. They have effectively stripped all abortion language from state law. There are no restrictions on abortion in Minnesota up into and beyond the moment of birth. I would argue that we have the most liberal or permissive abortion regime in the world. North Korea, we're on par with North Korea, not even comparing to other states. So that's the first thing they did. The other thing they did is they passed this trans refuge bill you probably heard about, which protects what they call gender affirming care, which is really, chemical castration or genital mutilation, these sex change operations on young people. They're trying to create Minnesota as some kind of haven that if you're in trouble in other states, if your other states don't allow that kind of thing, you can come to Minnesota and we'll be a haven for that. The governor actually talks about this as a tourism thing. We're going to attract Minnesotans to Minnesota because of our liberal abortion regime and our trans refuge state. I'm not kidding. You can look at his website, Selling Minnesota, the economic development website, tourism website. This is the new tourism for Minnesota from Governor Walz. Quite outrageous. Then lastly, they decided to wake up and change the human rights statute as it relates to pedophiles. There was language that was removed. This was a little bit, it was very interesting politically. They did this on the floor of the House. The House Republicans offered an amendment to change it and called them on it. That amendment passed overwhelmingly, and the language was removed, case closed. That didn't happen. But then, of course, they slipped it back into a conference committee, ended up back on the floor in a massive omnibus bill that was passed by all the Democrats. So essentially, I'm showing you the language here. This line that sexual orientation does not mean that, I can't read it. Does not include sexual attachment of children by an adult. That's the language that was removed in statute from the human rights section, arguably creating a protective class for pedophiles. So, and again, we polled some of these things on abortion. We polled 28% feel that abortion should be always legal in Minnesota. And that's essentially what the legislature did. They did what the 28% of Minnesotans wanted. Again, not following that at all. 67% of Minnesotans oppose safe sex changes for minors. Of course they do in Minnesota. And that's that trans refuge bill. No support for that. Off the cliff. Minnesotans are not with them. So that is the policy side. So we've done taxes, we've done policy. It's kind of a sobering presentation. It's not very hopeful. So we try to do, let's give some hope at the end here. So the climb back to sanity, we use the Price is Right guy, the climber guy from Price is Right. Remember, just climb up the thing, and he's not going to fall over because this is a hopeful part of the presentation. And again, I just want to remind you that while we set the stage, 59% of Minnesotans do not support this agenda. We were polling right as it was finishing. 51% of Minnesotans believe we're on the wrong track. So that just sets the stage for this. So the climb back to sanity, what does it mean in the state budget? Well, we have to repeal these tax increases that were enacted in the last session. And that sounds hard to do. It's hard to undo some of these things, and it will be. But you can only look to Iowa for hope. Iowa, not too long ago, 2018, their income tax rate was 8.98%, not far behind ours. And now, because they've got their own trifecta going the other direction, they're on the path to, by 2026, to have a flat rate of 3.9% for all income. So just as south in Iowa, they're cutting taxes. We can get back there. The politics will swing. It always does. Those on top will be not on top anymore. And then we'll be ready with these changes when it happens. A couple of good things did happen in the 2023 session, certainly in the area of education. We changed the way we teach reading now. So you've heard a lot about the science of reading, but how we teach reading is going to be back to evidence-based phonemic awareness, phonics, away from this nonsense that we've done in the state for many years. So some very good news on how we teach reading that should improve test scores. That was a very good thing. I mentioned earlier the changes to post-secondary enrollment options has already been challenged in court. There's an injunction in place. So there's some hope there that some of the things they did aren't gonna work. The real hope in education, the real climb back to sanity involves school choice. We have not tried school choice really in Minnesota yet. It's the one big education reform that we've never tried. We polled this in May. 74% of Minnesotans now support school choice, including a majority of Democrats. I mean, there has never been this much support for school choice, and the climb back to sanity in education starts and ends with school choice. The other thing for hope, there's a big effort going on to take back local school boards. You know, the state does a lot of education policy, but really the school board still has an immense amount of power in terms of how your kids are getting educated. A new organization that we helped start here at American Experiment called Minnesota Parents Alliance. I had a very good, successful track record last year in school board elections, and then they're playing again in this year. They're going to take over school boards and get common sense back locally. Again, some more good news from the 2023 session in the area of public safety. The legislature did not pass an all-out ban on no-knock search warrants, which we think is an important tool in the toolbox. We also had some very good success in carjacking. The legislature did create a new penalty for carjacking, great, but then they made a new class, I should say. They said, all right, carjacking is going to be a new type of crime, but they didn't add a penalty. They left that up to the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. But the Sentencing Guidelines Commission was about to do something very weak. You all, people in around Minnesota, emailed them through a campaign that we helped run. They got thousands of emails saying, no, make it a strong penalty. And they in fact did make carjacking a strong penalty. So some good news in that crime area. The good news, the climb back to sanity for energy really relies on repealing that blackout bill before it takes hold. It's got a few years as they ramp up. So if the politics changes, that could be repealed. And really the path is legalizing new nuclear power plants, small reactors like you're seeing around the country, you're seeing around the world. That's the future. Majority of Minnesotans support nuclear power in the mix, 53%. And this was pulled a while ago too. I think that this support would be much stronger even today if we pulled that again. The climb back to healthcare, again, some good news from the 2023 session. We did pass price transparency legislation. Our Peter Nelson, our senior fellow for healthcare, spent a lot of time working on this in the session, testifying in favor of it. And there is a bit of a legislative victory here in terms of price transparency, that people know what things cost. That will help keep the cost down. So that is our presentation. Hopefully we added some hope at the end. I can say that at American Experiment, we are going to stay and fight. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to Florida. We believe the politics will come around. We'll be ready with policies, ideas, research, bills. And we're going to stay and fight. It's kind of the name of our little campaign we ran this summer. If you'd like to get one of these really cool Stay and Fight t-shirts, just a $40 donation, we will send you that shirt. You can find a link in our website to donate, and keep this good work going, and have faith and stay and fight. So thanks a lot for watching. That's all we have for now.